Hello and welcome, this time not from my little space in Vienna, but from my hometown. It's before Christmas, there is an undecorated Christmas tree behind me. My name is Luisa, I'm a literature student and writer, and it is time to talk about books, all the books that I recently read and some of my favorites from 2025. And before we get started, I wanted to say a massive thank you to everyone who's watching. This year has been very exciting in so many different ways, and my little YouTube channel has been definitely a part of it. I'm very grateful for everyone who is watching and who's sticking around, and for all the people who comment. Like, it's so special for me to read your comments. I really enjoy it so much. So if you have something to share, maybe your favorite books from 2025, I would love to read about it. The books that I recently finished are all over the place. It's a little bit of fantasy in there, some literary fiction and Austrian classics, but I hope it's still interesting for you. I have my notes here, so every once in a while looking down, because whenever I'm reading, I try to write down some of my thoughts. I would like to start with a book by an Irish author. The book is called Panenka. The author is, if you pronounce it like that, Rónán Hession. I found the book at a local bookshop and I really enjoyed it. It's a very special book. It's not long. It is incredibly heavy and intense. So on the blurb it says, his name was Joseph, but for years they had called him Panenka, a name that was his sadness and his story. Panenka has spent 25 years living with his disastrous mistakes and begins to rebuild an improvised family life with his estranged daughter and her 7-year-old son. Faced with losing everything, he meets Esther, and together they find resonance in each other's experiences and learn new ways to let love into their broken lives. I felt like it's very softly written, even though it's on very heavy topics. I was very moved and a bit sad at the ending of the book, but somehow in a peaceful way. I don't know. The German word is versöhnlich. I never know how to translate this in English, so if you can help out, let me know in the comments. There are many beautiful characters and you get to see their life and everything that has gone wrong. Panenka was a football player and his career didn't turn out as he had imagined it. It talks a lot about guilt and relationships, love, and very deep emotions. The language felt a bit complex to me sometimes, but that could have just been a language barrier. I still loved it and I can only recommend it. Moving on to some epic fantasy. I read Earthsea, The Wizard of Earthsea, which is the first book in the series by Ursula K. Le Guin. And I remember someone in the comments recommended it to me. And it is one of the early fantasy books that came out when this whole genre kind of started to arise in the form that we know it today. But the way people wrote, also when you look at Tolkien, it was still kind of different than fantasy is nowadays. It's more like an epic tale or like a saga, more telling than showing in a way, which was slightly boring sometimes for me, because I really love when you go deep into the characters' emotions and when you learn about their character via their actions, and not because someone is telling me how the person is, but either way, it was still such a fantastic story. Knowing that the book was published in 1968, it wasn't that big of a deal breaker for me that the writing style was maybe not my favorite. It was still so well written and the plot was amazing. The blurb here says, Ged was the greatest sorcerer in Earthsea. But in his youth, he was the reckless sparrowhawk. In his hunger for power and knowledge, he tampered with long-held secrets and loosed a terrible shadow upon the world. This is the tumultuous tale of his testing, how he mastered the mighty words of power, tamed an ancient dragon, and crossed death's threshold to restore the balance. So we get to know this wizard and we know that he will be very big and important, but we learn about his story from the beginning and how he was as a young boy, and we follow him along, seeing him doing mistakes and how he handles them. And it's really exciting, and you can fall into this world, especially knowing that there are more books set in this world. The next two books are by Austrian authors. The first one is an Austrian classic that you often read in school. It is called Heldenplatz by Thomas Bernhard. And I have a bit of a struggle with Thomas Bernhard. It's not my favorite writing style, and everything that I have read so far was just not my favorite, but this was in school, so I thought I should definitely give it a try again. So I read Heldenplatz, which is a play, one of his most important ones. It is from 1988. Here it also says it is considered to be one of the most important German playwrights in the post-war era. You have to know that Heldenplatz is a square in Vienna where Hitler made his first speech after the Anschluss, after Austria became part of Hitler's Germany. And Thomas Bernhard writes about a Jewish professor who returns to Vienna after the Second World War, and he has to realize that the Austrian people are still anti-Semitic. And the topics are very important. I, for myself, just don't love the writing style. You either love it or you hate it. It's a bit of a thing here. It's still a very important piece of literature, and I think it's great to read it at some point. And what I've discovered during my studies is that sometimes you read literature out of pure pleasure, and sometimes you read it more for maybe an academic purpose or a political purpose because it has value in the topics and in the way it portrays something. And I think it's therefore very important literature, and it definitely gives you a lot to think. So when I finished the book, there were lots of thoughts that were provoked via reading it. So that's obviously the intention behind this book. When it comes to the writing style, I wrote down while reading it, I wrote down, it's not meant to be offensive. It is written the way people who are 50, 60 plus write text messages. And sometimes, it's just because you're so used to old phones where you only had a limited amount of words per message that you could send. So you really just wrote a few phrases, and sometimes they weren't full sentences. It feels like it's written in staccato. It's a bit bumpy to read, at least that's how it feels for me. It's also a play, obviously, so of course it mimics spoken language, so that's taken into account as well. The next book is also by an Austrian author. It's Menschen im Hotel. It was published in 1932 by Vicki Baum, and I almost wrote my master thesis about her, but then I realized her success period was after the Viennese modernism, the time that I was actually interested in. So I did not write about her, but I wanted to read some of her novels because they were actually quite famous. So it's set in a hotel, and you get to see glimpses of many different people's little stories, and it's very much like the atmosphere of a hotel that is so brilliantly portrayed in this book, because it's really like people come and go. You only get to see a certain amount of time and just a few parts of their life, really. It has a few dull phases in the book where things are described a little bit too long. But I think if you get past it, then it's a very cool book that portrays that time very well, like the late 20s and early 30s. So if that's something that you like, that could be interesting for you. And I really liked how it also showed the different sides, like the guests, but also the people who work there. And some people are rich and some are poor, and some have very difficult life situations, and others seem a bit more loose and happy. And yeah, it's a kind of mix of different characters, so it's very character driven. The next two books are in the genre of fantasy. The first one is called Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi, and I was very interested in it because it's one of the very few books representing Black community, and that was really beautiful to see. So the blurb says, "They killed my mother, they took our magic, they tried to bury us. Now we rise." Zeli remembers when the soil of Orisha hummed with magic. Burners ignited flames, Tidus beckoned waves, and Zeli's Reaper mother summoned forth souls. But everything changed the night magic disappeared. Under the order of a ruthless king, Magi were killed, leaving Zeli without a mother and her people without hope. And the beginning was promising, and I thought, okay, this is going to be a new favorite. And there are, I think, 2 more books in the series, if I'm not mistaken. And I think they're even making it a film. But for me, the momentum got a little bit lost in the story. I think it's still a very great book, and I might even read the next ones. But I was a bit disappointed, to be completely honest. So the first half was great and amazing and I loved it. And then, I don't know, everything felt so easy and the solutions were like, yeah, kind of obvious. The characters all felt extremely young, but in a way that didn't feel suitable for the story and their actions. There are different perspectives of the different characters, but for me, the different characters' perspectives, they didn't add much to the story because they were all very similar in the way they saw things. I mean, yes, they had different worldviews, but they really aligned quite fast. It was a bit predictable, and there might be some incredible plot twists in the next 2 books. I've come to a point, and this has happened in fantasy so many times, that people say, yeah, you have to get over the first book or maybe the first 2 books, but then it gets amazing. And I'm like, yeah, but I want to read a series where the first book is already intriguing and great already, if you know what I mean. And like I said, I did like the book, and I think there was some promising aspects, and I still think it might be worth to read the next few books. The next one was a bit of a surprise for me. My book club suggested it. It's called A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping by Sangu Mandanna. I read another book by this author, The Very Secret Society of Witches, and it was too cozy for me. It was this romantic, cozy fantasy book, and I didn't love it. And then I thought, okay, let's give this other book a try. And the second half of the book had lots of elements that the first book had, with all this romantic parts that were, it's just not my favorite thing. It's very cheesy, and I'm like, ugh, I don't need that. I do love a good romance, but in these romance books, it's often a bit too much. But the first half was so good that I actually could kind of overlook the rest, and I really liked the story. It's about a witch who does this reincarnation spell to bring her aunt back to life, I think. And this is actually forbidden, and then she loses her magic because she used all her power. And the magic guild afterwards excludes her from the magic community, basically. And this could have been a very intense fantasy book, but it obviously had those cozy elements in it, and it was nice to read, nice and cozy. Last but not least, I'm not 100% sure if I have mentioned this book, but I think I haven't because I didn't cross it off my list, and it is Cleopatra and Frankenstein by Coco Mellors. I definitely have spoken about her other book, the second one that she published, I think, which is called Blue Sisters, and I really loved Blue Sisters. But with Cleopatra and Frankenstein, which was such a hype, I was disappointed. I didn't love it. The beginning was dull, and I just didn't like the characters. They were so annoying. But I do love the writing style, and I think her dialogues are really well made. Maybe it was just because I read the other book first. Maybe it would have been the other way around. Or maybe not. So I would recommend her second book, Blue Sisters. To conclude this year, I would say my 2 favorite books were Babel, even though I'm not sure if I read it last year or this year. I don't exactly remember, but it is an academic fantasy novel. It has very few fantasy elements, or like they are very subtle, and it is very slow paced, but it is so exciting. I absolutely love the author R.F. Kuang. The other book that I really loved this year was Orbital. I cannot recommend it enough. I think it's such a beautiful way of describing the Earth and just zooming out. The characters are outside in a spaceship, and it's very melancholic and emotional in a way. I don't know, it was moving, it was definitely moving, but I just love this atmospheric perspective and the views and the pictures that open up while reading it, so highly recommend. Quickly hopping in, I forgot to mention one favorite from earlier this year. It is the book Echtzeitalter by Tonio Schachinger. It's about a boy stumbling through puberty, family issues, and first love. It's set in Vienna. The character finds himself again in the virtual gaming world, and it reminded me of the book Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. I would say it's the Austrian equivalent to it, but maybe even better. And it really catches the Viennese vibe and the Austrian humor I think it's very well written. Unfortunately, I couldn't find an English translation, but if you speak German, definitely check it out. And there is one series that I wanted to mention. It's Daisy Jones and the Six. I did not read the book, but if some of you have read it, I would love to know if it's worth reading after you saw the series, because I love the series so much. The cast was brilliant, and I think it's so full of rage and passion and emotions and energies. And it is time to finish my tea and enjoy Christmas. I hope you do as well, and I wish you a happy new year, and I'll see you in 2026. Goodbye. This is very in-depth. That's maybe a bit too much. Threshold. And